right, welcome back to the podcast. Today we have an awesome guest on, a good friend of mine that I met in Ukraine, a Norwegian by way of Australia, I guess you would say. But we have Adam Reed. He is a former Australian cop that worked covert operations within the Australian police force and then went on to become a combat photographer, has gone to Mosul in Ukraine and Iraq and a bunch of other places. Adam, thanks for coming on, brother.
Good to see you, mate.
I didn't butcher that intro too much. You gave me a list. I'm like looking through. I was like, this is a hell of a resume. So I'm just trying to gloss it over real quick in 10 seconds. But no, man, it's great seeing your face. And I know we talk every so often and drop each other voice messages and whatnot. But it's awesome to finally get you on the podcast.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we'll give a fun backstory with me and you. We met in Ukraine during the opening days of the war in March of 2022. So that was a lot different times in Ukraine. And you've been back since then, correct?
Yeah, twice.
Yeah, twice. Yeah. So we met through a mutual friend that was working with Black Rifle. I always forget his handle and his name. I feel bad about that. But
I know, yeah, he was kind of working for them, I think.
It was like a influencer vendor or something. Yeah, it was. I think he did a little bit of social media too, but I feel bad and I'm forgetting his name. But yeah, we had linked up. I was getting a ton of messages back then. I'm sure you were too, of everybody that was like, oh, this guy, I know he's in there. Go check him out, or this guy or whatever and whatnot. So it was awesome linking up with you. And, we bullshitted for a while there in Lviv and then I met back up in Norway not too long after that for the podcast that you did with your old company. So, yeah, man, it was awesome. Hell of an experience, and you've been back since then. So that's pretty awesome. But let's dive into kind of where you started off in this wild career path. I think that we're all kind of on. So you started off in Australia, and you were born and raised there. What was your family and history like down there?
Yeah, born and bred in Oz. My mother's Scottish and the old man's Australian. And, grew up there in a pretty rough place. And then Dad, he did really well with his business. Actually, my family's pretty much a military family in some ways. He served in the Air Force. My uncle served in the Army. And my granddad served in the Army. And my other granddad served in the Norwegian Merchant Navy. Mm-hmm. And that granddad, that's a super interesting story.
Yeah, you were telling me about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you go to the family history, he lived in Glasgow and he tried to get into the UK Navy, the British Navy. He applied at 16, lied about his age, didn't get in, also because he had flat feet. And I don't know if you know that, in the First and Second World Wars, you could not get into the Defence Forces if you had flat feet because they had this stupid mentality, whereas that you were a lower class person if you had a flat foot, mm-hmm. and that you were prone to physical disabilities. Mm-hmm. Ridiculous thing that they did. So he didn't get in. So my mother's mother at that point had a boarding house, they called it, where they would rent out like a room, and a Norwegian actually rented the room for a while and became friends with her father. Mm-hmm. The Norwegian was a little bit older, but they became friends, and he told him the story about not getting into the British Navy. He said, well, why don't you try the Norwegians? Because at that point, the Norwegian government basically said to all merchant ships, you are now part of the Allied forces. Mm-hmm. So you will go and deliver cargo and supplies and personnel and all that sort of stuff. You don't have a choice, basically. They did a similar thing with the Brits. Remember when they rescued them from
Dunkirk?
Yep. So he said, great. And I only found out today, actually, I spoke to my mother, and I've got a picture of him in a sailor's uniform. Mm-hmm. And that sailor's uniform didn't belong to him. It belonged to this guy who told him he should go into the Norwegian Navy. So he took this picture as a bit of a joke and sent it to his mother and said, guess what, I got in. And it's fake. So he traveled with this guy to Norway, ended up in the Norwegian Merchant Navy, sailed to New York, picked up a ton of coal and supplies, and then stopped in Cape Town and was on the way to Bombay with supplies when his ship, which was called the Oost, A-U-S-T, was spotted by a German raider they called these German ships back then radar ships, which basically meant they were disguised as cargo ships, but they were actually kind of a battleship that could transport personnel and cargo. So what happened is, as they're sailing, the ship had seen them and sent a plane. They had this aircraft that would be on the ship, and which attacked his ship, which my grandfather was on, and it caused quite a lot of damage. And so then the captain ordered they destroy all the records that they had, and then he ordered abandoned ship, because what happened is the aircraft returned to the German ship called Tor, and then it started shooting its cannons at the ship. It didn't want to do that while the aircraft was in the air. So it was damaged. All of the crew survived. The Germans took them as prisoners of war. And the British citizens, which included the Scots, were sent to Japan. And the Norwegians were sent also actually to Japan in the beginning, and then sent on another ship back to Germany to be prisoners of war in Germany.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, so he was sent to Nagasaki. No, not Nagasaki. He started there, but ended up in Tokyo. At Tokyo Camp 1, it was called, 1B, and which was located near the harbour. And he was there for 3.5 years. What people don't know, and I didn't know this until I started researching the story, is that during the Second World War, everyone knows about the 2 atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Yeah.
But what the Americans actually did is almost completely wipe out Tokyo with incendiary bombs. Napalm bombs.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
So, and because the housing was wooden, lots of fields, everything just burnt up. So the pictures I've seen of where his camp was looks probably even worse than the atomic pictures that you see. Crazy. So 22 were killed by the Allied bombing in his camp. He survived. And during that time, he wrote a letter to my parents that actually got through. And I've got a Red Cross telegram that says, that Mum sent me, that says, you are very lucky to receive a letter from your son and for him to receive one, because that almost never happens within Japanese camps. So the letter she sent me has the Japanese camp name and the stamps and everything like that, the date. Super interesting. So anyway, at the end of the war, he made it out, and along with a number of others. He was actually, I've got pictures and stuff of an American cruise ship and the admiral actually looking at all the prisoners as he arrived, and in that particular camp was my grandfather, but I can't see him in the picture.
Yeah.
So he gets out and makes it back to Australia, and then sends a telegram to his parents, goes to Glasgow, meets my grandfather, and has kids and moves to Australia.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, that's
It's just
that's a hell of a
amazing.
story. Yeah, absolutely.
Crazy. But the thing is, like a lot of people who've been to war or have been a POW, he suffered big time from PTSD. So he ended up drinking himself to death, unfortunately.
What years was that then? Like, did you know him? I mean, it's your granddad?
I never met him.
Oh, okay.
He died in 67, I think, and I was born in 72.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So he's pretty young then still, I imagine.
44, he died at 44.
Oh, geez. Yeah. And then they lived in Melbourne?
Yeah.
Yep.
In South Melbourne, yeah.
That's
So crazy story.
And that's on your mom's side. That's on your mom's side.
Yeah. And my father's side, his dad was also in the military, but he didn't get to see combat because they operated on his tonsils. He had a problem with his tonsils. Like a lot of the quick way in the old days was just to get rid of tonsils instead of trying to treat it. I don't even know if they had treatment back then for it. So they fucked up his surgery. So he ended up in hospital for 2 years and couldn't serve. So he's military. No, what do you call it? Medically discharged.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Yeah, and my other uncle, he served in the army, but actually just in logistics, I think.
Okay. Before we keep going with the podcast, I want to drop this week's discount code for 9line Apparel. We're not just a brand, we're a lifestyle that celebrates the spirit of freedom, courage, and American values. Go check out our gear, including hoodies, glassware, flags, jackets, hats, patches, and much more. All material is ethically sourced, so every shirt you buy is free of slave labor, And as a veteran-owned and operated company, we take pride in giving back to those who served. Your purchase helps us contribute to charitable initiatives supporting veterans and first responders. This episode's discount code is WARPHOTO20 for 20% off 9-line apparel products. I say again, WARPHOTO20. WARPHOTO 20. Not 10, not 15, but 20%. Not 25 because that's a bit excessive and we have to make a profit. So 20% off your next purchase. So go over to the store and get yourself 20% off your next purchase. While you're at it, like, listen, and subscribe to the 9-Line Podcast for future discounts, codes, and more conversations with amazing guests like today. Now back to the podcast. So you got
the crazy thing.
Yeah. You got a history there. That's awesome. So then growing up, and that led you obviously to Melbourne. So what was it like growing up I don't know much about Australian culture, so I hear about it all the time, but so what's it like growing up in Melbourne? Like you said, it's just, it's huge. I think that's the one thing I remember learning more and more. I had a friend that had WIT and she taught there, and it was just kind of like that weird thing of like, Australia is fucking huge. So so they're like, when you drive to Sydney to, is it Melbourne or one of it's like 20 hours or some ridiculous amount of time, or not 20 hours, but an insane amount to get there. It's bigger than the US. So it's kind of like driving from coast to coast almost.
Yeah. Well, if you take a plane from Melbourne to Perth, it's 5 hours. Oh,
no shit. So that's a hell of a jump. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's massive.
Yeah.
But, so I grew up in a rough-ish suburb in Melbourne. And like I said, Dad made some good money in his business. He left the Air Force and got into IT, basically.
Oh, okay. And back then in IT, I imagine it was probably, it's
very
lucrative
early.
now. Yeah. It's like, and my mother's a programmer, but she got in when it was not a bachelor's, it was just like a tech skill. And so, it was good money, but if you were, you're getting into IT back in the day, way back in the day, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, he was he got in at the right time. And I remember he even said back then he really wanted to enter China as a market because he could see the potential and how big it was going to be. And he actually tried. He employed a Chinese guy and everything like that, but there was so much corruption within the government at that point, he just couldn't get it to work. Mm-hmm. So we moved and, growing up as a kid, I was always fascinated by war and so I used to play army all the time. Mm-hmm. One of my good friends back then ended up joining the SAS. He and I used to jump in the parks and by the seaside part and shoot at each other with air rifles and all that sort of stuff, which was fun. But mate, I did not know what I wanted to do. My old man said to me, he kicked me in the ass. He said, "Get out and get a job." And I left school and he said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "You know what? I don't know." I was thinking maybe the army, but I was thinking there was nothing happening at that point. So I was like, I don't actually want to do that because what am I going to end up doing is just being just marching and doing boring shit. So I thought, what about the police? And I joined and I got in. We had 60 applicants that went into the academy with us and we graduated with, I think, 30 or a little less. Mm-hmm. And it was good. It was an eye opener. I really grew up. I had my 19th birthday in the police academy. I was super young. Yeah. And but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the challenge. And what happened actually when you graduate is that you are sent to a police station. You don't get to send. You do not get sent to one where you live. You get sent to another one so that you don't patrol areas where you've lived. Straight away. After a while you can, but. So I was sent to the roughest and toughest place in Victoria, which Melbourne is a part of. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, shit, this is going to be interesting, And one of my mates in the squad, he was sent to a surf beach, pretty much, a police station. I was like, I'm jealous. I was like, this dude's going to surf all the time. Yeah. And it ended up being what happened during the police training, it goes for 2 years, is that you come back to the police academy and do a course for about 6 or 8 weeks. I can't remember, but just to refresh everything to find out what you've learnt. And you do have to pass it. Otherwise you do not become a qualified policeman. Mm-hmm. And what I found is that when I came back is that we had to do these mock interviews where we would arrest someone and then actually do a taped interview with them. And I could probably still do it, reel off the speech, This is a taped recorded interview between such and such at this time, and give them their rights and stuff. I could do it verbatim because I'd done it at this busy police station so much.
Yeah.
And this guy on the surf beach, he couldn't do it. He said I think he interviewed 2 people in the whole time that he'd been out at the police station.
Mm-hmm.
So it was cool. I was like, okay, I actually survived it. But back then, man, it was old school rules where as a trainee detective, all the other policemen wouldn't look at you, wouldn't talk to you. You had to earn respect.
Mm-hmm.
You were basically the scum. I remember being in a briefing and there was maybe 12 of us in this briefing, and the senior sergeant was up there doing the briefing. And any comments? And I made a comment about something about this car that was stolen, and no one looked at me, no one answered, no one commented, and he continued.
Yeah, he's like, "Who the fuck are you?"
Like I was scum of the earth,
Yeah.
But
that's
it
awesome.
was
So
awesome.
there's just that culture that that what's cool hearing that from your perspective, that like the Australian police force. So they were just like rough and tumble, like we got shit to do. There's no fucking around, there's a higher, pecking order and all that stuff like that. It's cool to hear that, because I have friends that become cops later on, and everyone kind of, things are different nowadays. I'm sure, I think you said like, back in the 90s, especially where I think you were at, and I know we'll get into it, but everything that was going on with like the drug trade. And like I said, for 2 years, you were basically in it. And so then going back to having to train and being like, yeah, we do this all the time.
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I compare it to when you go to a war zone, like you hear about, doesn't matter what unit you're in, special forces or conventional, it doesn't matter. If you've experienced war, the new guys that come in, they're nothing. They know nothing. They need to shut up and learn, and that was the mentality back then in the police. And I've taken that with me throughout my life now. Like I could not be a policeman now because everyone, not everyone, but there's a lot of them who are lazy. They don't want to be detectives. They don't want to do the work. They want to get the salary and demand respect, Yeah. And it's just not, you need to earn respect in my book. You need to prove your worth and prove yourself. And I guess I kind of had that anyway. My old man was, he ran the family with an iron fist, and he's the reason I started boxing. I just wanted to start to be able to defend myself, and one day I did. I threw him against the wall, and I said, "You ever try that again, I'm going to knock you out." So it was hard. I remember my grandfather, the one I did meet, who couldn't serve because of the medically discharged thing. He thought I was spoilt as a kid,
Yeah.
And that's back then.
Yeah.
Could you imagine if he was alive now, what he would see the kids of today? Oh,
Yeah.
He would roll on his grave.
It's different generations. I know. I think like putting them into perspective. I mean, you have kids. I'm starting off. I got a young toddler and another on the way, and it is that weird, like how people grow up and like some, even people that were poor, you didn't feel poor. Like we were pretty low income family, but my parents worked their way up. But it's like, it was almost kind of like that mentality is like, yeah, man, go in the backyard, start playing with sticks, and now it's like my daughter has like an iPad and we're watching movies, and it's so different. And no, like I said, there is some times when, I shouldn't say I'm rough and tumble. I'm rough and tumble with my daughter, but at the same time, like I know, like especially going through the military or whatever, like you have to have that adversity. You have to say no. You just, and I think that's where I think a lot of people haven't gone through that. Like even I would say my generation, when they're having kids, it's been a pretty soft life,
How old are you, mate?
Well, I'm 36 going on 37 now, so cause even like, and some of my friends, like we in the military, but it's like sometimes culturally or just like, most kids I grew up with, life was pretty fucking good, and then if they have kids and it's like, if you weren't like said, like rough and tumble back in your day, or even if you have discipline or whatever in that adversity, like you need that even kind of saying no and making sure that you don't always get what you want. You have to be respectful. Like that's a big thing in my household is like respect. Like you,
Me too.
You respect your mom and dad. You say thank you to mom. Like I'll take the iPad away. Say, do you say please? Do you say thank you? And she's like, thank you. You're like, yep, there you go. Now you can come back, but you will acknowledge this. You will acknowledge. You will have respect for your parents. So I think sometimes I think things just become a little easier for people and parents. They're just like, whatever, we didn't do that, or who cares, and that mentality kind of starts snowballing. And I think that's when you start having issues.
Massive issues.
Yeah, massive issues, especially like if you're having kids now or they're in their 3 or 4 or 5 years old, you're starting to see the way kids are disciplined. And it's just my father-in-law is a substitute teacher. He's kind of semi-retired, but he's seeing a lot of it with like the teenagers, and it's fucking bad. It's bad. Like he's like, I don't even know how these teachers survive. And these aren't like rough and tumble schools either. They're kind of rough, but like, you kind of, like I said, I like when you talk about that, because it's like, back in the day. But sometimes it is like, back in the day, it is. Like, it is. It's like back in the day, you just get the shit kicked out of you. And then there's nothing you can do. But you have to rise to the occasion, or you learn from it. Like, my big thing was like wrestling. I just got the shit kicked out of me. And you either get better, or you continue to get the shit kicked out of you. And like some people apply that, sometimes like kids get beat up. So like, well, you better, sack up, especially like back in, your day, or kind of like my day, we didn't have a ton of bullying, but I knew friends that grew up that were like getting bullied in school. It's like, you better, no one's coming to your defense. So it's either you go hit the weight room or learn how to fight. Cause like it's,
you gotta face it.
Yeah. But anyways, so you were crushing it at the being a cop, or going back. So did you get your qualification then, and then kind of move forward?
And then I remember the day that one of the senior boys, he said to me, they used to call me Reedy because my son is Reedy. He said, Reedy, you're a good lad. Because I would shut up, I would listen. And he would say, we need more beer. And I would go and get them more beer, I would just do as I told. And I kind of liked that mentality they had, and that roughness. So I wanted to get it into the detective scene. And you basically, you have to go through detective training school to be qualified as a detective. I never did that. But what I did do is I did detective work as a detective constable, I was called. So I spent 6 months at a detective office in a little bit further away from the rough area, and then ended back in the rough area. And that's when I thought, I want to do more. I want to do something that's cool. I don't want to wear a suit anymore. I was glad to be out of uniform. I hadn't been wearing a uniform for ages. I want to do some covert stuff. So basically, at that point, we had a unit called the DSG, the District Support Group. And they would choose one person out of each police station within a district, which was massive, to be part of the unit. So we had a 4-man team within our district. And it was on performance driven. So you had to, it was basically the people who had the highest stats within the police stations were considered for it. Then I had to go through the interview processes and things, and I got the job. And it was awesome, man. Like, I was a sergeant in 3. And, I had a beard. I used to wear bad clothes and buy heroin on the streets and do these drug buys. And it was just a completely and utter different lifestyle where we weren't even on the main radio. We would have our own internals, and we used to basically do a lot of surveillance, a lot of drug work, major crime work. We would assist with them. I did within our team, in fact, all of the UC work, undercover work. So quite often I would go out to the street, buy heroin, and then find out who the supplier was, and then we'd do a raid on the supplier. And because we were a small team, there were, I think, 3 teams of us, 3 teams of 4, but they were from other areas. So, for example, we did this one drug buy once where I bought heroin off this guy, and I made a deal with him that if he could give me his supplier, then I might drop the charges against him. So he gave me a name and a number, and I called this guy and I said, and I was working in an area with lots of Vietnamese people, lots of Asians. And I said, in my best druggy accent, mate, mate, I need to get on. Can I meet up? I got your number from such and such, And he asked me a few questions, and after a while he goes, okay, fine, you need 150 Australian dollars, which back then was a lot of money. And I added that I was getting, I think, 5 grams of rock heroin. was a long time ago. I may have got the numbers wrong. Maybe it was 750. I can't remember the amount. It was a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, cool. I was going to meet him at this bus stop, and I told the team, and we came up with a plan, and another team assisted us. We needed more people. There were so many moving factors. It was quite open, so then they just needed to stay distance away to be hidden, to be able to come in when it should hit the fan, you know, on different directions. And so I wore these painter's overalls. I had my, no shirt on, so I had like this shot off my chest and had a can of VB beer, which is this Victorian bitter beer.
Yeah.
And I turn up and I'm sitting at the bus stop, you know, just drinking. And I've got a 5-shot pistol, actually a revolver on my ankle. They were the smallest that we had back then. So very compact, you couldn't see them, a snub nose 38. And anyway, they turn up in this car, these two Asian guys, and they're looking around, and they've got their hands like this, you know, like they're got guns and stuff. And I was just like, yeah, man, look, I really need it. And so hand over the money, looks around, gives it to me. And then they jump in the car and they're about to drive off. And then the team comes in, you know. And then I stumbled to get my bloody my revolver out. And I said, please get down. They're looking at me like, who the fuck? You aren't a policeman. You just bought heroin, you know.
Yeah.
And then we all come in and the car's like a movie. Block the entrances back and forth. And, you know, and we used to do shit all the time. But the coolest part of it was when we got this guy, we did a big raid after that. And I was the breacher. You know, it was my job. I did the surveillance through the week and stuff, and it was again Vietnamese in this flat, and I was the breacher, and you know we all got vests and guns out and stuff, and I had which we would call the key. You know, back then it was designed a little bit differently, but pretty much a standard breaching bar.
Yeah.
And the trick what we did is that you would hit the door handle itself. Which would usually break the lock and open doors. Some people did differently with shotguns and things, but we used to do that, the breacher bar on that. And I hit it so hard that the handle ended up at the other end of the house.
Yeah.
It woke everyone up. It was 5 a.m. Please get down.
Yeah.
And, you know, we got loads of heroin and drugs and stuff. And it was cool. And like that part of the job, I loved it. I loved the action. I loved the team. Like I said before, you know, we didn't have anything to do with the uniform guys. We did our own thing, and it was just so much fun. But it got to the point where I just wasn't interested in dealing with shit people anymore. Mm-hmm. And so I decided to get out and end up I went to Bali on a surfing trip. Actually, another reason I decided to get out is I was interviewed for assault. Like this prisoner, this guy accused me of assaulting him. And it was just complete and utter bullshit. Mm-hmm. He was really drunk, this massive dude. It took me, my partner, and 3 security guys to control him. And during the process, he broke his thumb when I was trying to get the cuffs on him. Then he accused me of beating him up and stuff. And it was purely to get out of the charges that he was facing. And we would see this a lot, you know. Mm-hmm. They would countercharge you with, this policeman's assaulted me and things like that. And I went on a surfing trip with a mate for 3 weeks, and I probably surfed twice and drank probably for 18 days. Mm-hmm. And I was just said, I'm over it, man. Like we worked so hard that we were bordering on becoming alcoholics. You know, we would drink so many days of the week, and it was just bad, man. It was a bad culture. And it started to affect me. And on that trip, I said, mate, I'm done. He goes, no one quits. You won't quit. So I'm not quitting. I just need a different path. You know, this is not working out. Mm-hmm. And I did. I got back from Bali and I put a resignation on my boss's desk the same day. And I was out. That was a Monday, and I left on Friday. Mm-hmm.
That's it's pretty. I don't say cool, but it's interesting to hear you say that, because that's how like we all felt. And like I said, you're on that. You're just operating at such a high level, and you're go. And you're dealing with, I imagine with the police too, like I have buddies that are cops that like you deal with the shittiest people of society. So it's kind of like that skewed, you know, like obviously there's other people doing everything's fine. But your sole purpose is to deal with the shitty people of society, like the people that are breaking laws, you know, or you're like in your case, selling heroin, you know, which is a big fucking deal. And, you know, it's like you said, though, when you start to burn out or you can kind of identify yourself, because otherwise we've seen it in the military too. Like you go too far. Like you gotta, sometimes you just have to hang it up or you gotta take a break. And a buddy of mine, Joe, on the one last podcast, he said it was a really good analogy. You're on a flaming roller coaster and you don't understand that it's a flaming roller coaster until you get off it. And then you look back and you're like, that was insane. Like, why are we on this flaming roller coaster? Like, to keep that up and that op tempo. And then you have to finally step back and be like, it's time to move on or, figure something else out. So you do that. And then, how do you end up making your way into, or, I mean, do you have any other awesome stories? Cause that was pretty sweet story.
So many, man.
Yeah. So what was was that your biggest bust then, that heroin, or did you guys have some
we
wild
did
stuff?
loads of stuff. Loads of stuff. Have you seen the movie Point Break with Keanu Reeves?
Yeah.
Do you remember when there's that scene where the feds come over and they're doing surveillance and the feds come and it's their shift and they give them pizza and stuff and they leave? Mm-hmm. We used to do that a lot, man. And I remember once we had surfboards in the back. We did surveillance in this massive drug plantation. And we'd been there all day, 8 hours, and the next shift took over. We went straight to the surf beach and surfed. Every time I see Point Break, I think about those days. Yeah. I mean, we did so much crazy stuff. But, you get accustomed to it, like the death. I saw so much death that it becomes a second nature, like it does with a soldier. You just get used to it. But one thing that was hard that I will never forget was before, when I was working in uniform in the beginning of my career, I'd served 3 months in a community policing squad, which is basically like a sexual assault crimes unit. Mm-hmm. And it was part of the training in that 2 years. Mm-hmm. And we got called to a school where the principal had called the police because a girl was in his office. And we went into the office and the mother arrived too. And then we said, what's the problem? And basically the girl had told the teacher in class, that she was always having sleepover parties. Her dad was organising with it. And then everyone would get to play with dad's dick.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah.
Yeah. And we just go, what? So I took it back. It was my job to take a statement from this kid. I took a 12-page statement and I used a doll and things so we could find out what this guy did to her and her friends. And, man, I was ropeable. I was young. At that point, I was 20, but I was so angry.
Yeah.
I just wanted to catch this guy when he put this girl through. And the mother knew about his past but thought it was in the past and didn't know what he was doing. So he would call up kids in the classroom's parents and say, hey, we have a sleepover. It'd be great if such and such could come over. And then when they were sleeping, he'd go into their rooms and sexually assault them and get them to do all sorts of things to him. And anyway, so we're looking for this guy, and a week later we get this call of a suicide, and we get to a property, and because I had the registration number of his car, it was his car, and he was in the car and he'd gassed himself. Mm-hmm. And he left a note and it said, I just can't change, I'm sorry. I know this is a week way out, but it's just how it is, and he was dead when we got there, and I just spat on him. I was angry, man.
Yeah.
But the worst part of it was that I then had to go and give this kid the death notice, I had to go and tell him that his father's now in heaven. That was my job. And that was the hardest part. Yeah. Like this purely innocent little kid who didn't know any, right from wrong, is probably screwed for life now. One, because she was abused, and two, because her father committed suicide. I guess unless she moved to a completely new area, everyone would know about it. Yeah. And that still stays with me now, The things that I saw that involved kids in the police, I could tell you hundreds of them, they don't go away. They stay. Yeah. The violence is violence, I don't think too much about that. But, so that was pretty hard. And in the end, I'm done. So I left and travelled to, not the world, but Europe, went backpacking for a year and ended up meeting my ex-wife, who's Norwegian, in Scotland. And then she got pregnant and we came back and raised a family in Norway, got 3 kids. But during that time, the whole time, I'd been missing that adrenaline. Like it just, you can go back and look at that Ferris wheel that's burning, but it's still here as well, Oh,
yeah. Yep.
So, and one thing I never did is I never tested myself in the police in a firefight. Mm-hmm. So, and because I had this military history in the back of my head with my family. I was like, there's something driving me to go and look for it. And then, when Mosul kicked off, ISIS kicked off, I was like, how can I get in there? Actually, before that, I was offered a job as a private security contractor in Baghdad. I even applied for a job with, what are they called? Something Armour. This a British private security company that was massive in Iraq.
Was it Aegis? Aegis?
No, it was something Armour. Our friends worked there. I can't remember. But I even went for an interview with them. I went to this interview day where they had, 100 dudes, ex-military guys who wanted to work for them. And I was the last one to go into and have a one-on-one with the owner. And he said, I had left you to last. And I said, why is that? And he said, because you don't have a military background. I said, I realize that, but with all the undercover stuff I've done, I mean, if you want to talk about stress, then I know how to deal with stress. He said he'd been shot at. And I said, indirectly, yes, but not directly. Have you used a firearm? No. He said, okay, we need guys with basically war experience. And I didn't get a job. And reflecting on it, that was a good thing. I mean, good thing is in that they screen that highly that if you don't have combat experience, you're not going to become a private contractor. You're not going to be one of these cowboys that just gets given a gun who worked on a bar or something, which is kind of good. But because I didn't get it, I was like, shit, I want to do this. And then because I'd been a photographer for a long time, I was like, why don't I just go as a freelance photographer? And so I found out that this Norwegian, I don't even remember back then how I found out about Max, but this guy was a nurse and he was volunteering on the front lines in Mosul. He did one tour and he was going to head back. And I got in touch with him and I said, I'm a photographer. I'd love to, I've just become a member of the Journalists Association. I'd love to come and document what you're doing. He goes, cool. So ended up doing exactly that. He'd been in Mosul in Nivna province for, I think, a month. And then I arrived, and it was Max, a medic, Kim, a medic, Katrina as a female doctor. And they were hanging, or a guy was hanging with them was a Green Beret combat photographer, currently serving at that time. And I'm like, man, this is awesome. We'll meet up. And so we met at a CCP at the gates of Nivna province. And it was like being in a movie. Yeah. It was so much going on that there were drones. You could tell very quickly the difference between the Iraqi attack helicopters and the Americans, because the Americans would do short bursts. The Iraqis would just use up all their ammunition and then leave and go load up again, Yeah. Just little things like that. The fast movers, the jets coming in. And there was Iraqi grad rocket systems behind us shooting over our heads. And this is all going on. I'm like, this is so cool, man. Like, this is just unbelievable. I'm in the middle of this moment in history, So I was carrying away with the camera, and then we walked next to where we were was a place called IED Hill, and it's actually been quite a few Navy SEAL photographs from that particular place before they got there. And it was completely mined, somewhat cleared. And then as we start walking, I said to them, has this been completely cleared? And they said, not further than this point. But we kept walking, so I just followed their footsteps, Yeah.
Try to stay light.
And, there was ISIS bodies everywhere, tunnel networks. There was this really interesting, I took a picture of it, sign on a wall that would look like a medieval, like a knight and shining armor sign, just the head. And apparently that was a torture chamber that ISIS had used. And so we go a little bit further, and I took this iconic picture of this cartoon of this doctor standing on this rock, and there's just smoke and bombs going off, And then we hang around there for a while, and then we go further in, and it was my first time there, of course. And so we follow this tank, Iraqi tank, into the front, and not by planning, just by chance, it happened to be going in. We're in this pickup truck, and Max says, hey, we could stop here and get some pictures. And it was an intersection, a crossroads. And what ISIS did is they would use these trailer trucks, containers to block roads. they used everything, but quite a lot of containers we used. And, you know, these had been pushed aside, but so it was a narrow gap to get through, and we stopped. And there's this few civilians to the right kind of walking around, and there was housing, and then there was this open road and field, and then there was housing to the left. And I started taking pictures, and I noticed as the ISOF, the Iraqi Special Forces Humvees were coming past, that no one was outside the Humvees, they were inside. So that's kind of interesting. And then the first shot comes, and I've gone, we looked at each other, what the and another one, thing, and it hit this blue container behind us. I've hit the deck, and the shots kept coming, and then the crew ran to the left because they were housing, securing them from the sniper. But my first instinct was to hit the deck.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, fuck, now I need to move. The shots are still coming. You know?
Yeah.
So I've just gone, fuck. And I just got up and I sprinted over to the guys. The shots are going on. And I get there, and this combat photographer actually filmed some of that. He's got some awesome footage of that.
Yeah.
And then we're like, oh, did anyone get hit? No, we're good. I said, oh, fuck, cool. And anyway, Kim, one of the medics, he dropped his GoPro out and just where I'd been shot at. So Max is crazy idiot. He runs out and grabs his GoPro and comes back again.
Yeah.
Right in the sniper's line of fire, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think we were obviously extremely lucky not to get hit, but who knows? It could have been a sniper. It could have been a kid with an AK, but they were accurate shots. They just didn't hit us.
Yeah.
So we have no idea. And we continued on, and, you know, by the sides of the road, there were suicide bombers that and what was left of them, and everything was destroyed. It was chaos. And then we get to the forward CCP, and there actually right near that is where there's a picture used quite a lot on social media with the two Navy SEALs. One sniper's looking out, and he's wearing a black T-shirt, I think, or maybe an ISOF uniform top, and he's sniping out. That was right next to this forward CCP where we are. It was just to the left. And so we get to the forward CCP, and, you know, Katrina, the doctor, and the medics are working on all the patients that ISOF are bringing in, both dead and wounded. And during this time, rockets are going off around the house that we're in. Mm-hmm. And so I remember I was doing an interview with Kim to ask him about that stupid GoPro, and I'm sitting like this in the back of a pickup, and there's a doorway with a gap like that. I'm looking straight out into a cemetery where the snipers were. I'm like, this is not smart, you know. So I moved back a little bit. Yeah. And I thought, I'm not just going to sit here like a target. So I said to the combat photographer, I said, hey, man, do you want to go to the roof and have a look? So we get up there, and, you know, again, like a movie, bombs going off. And there's a few hellfires that hit really close to us. Mm-hmm. And then I'm filming, and then again, someone snipes us. Fuck, again. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what it was, stupidity, absolute stupidity, but I thought, fuck you, I was angry. And I've got him on video saying, I'm fucking angry, man. I just want to fucking kill that guy. Kill that guy who tried to shoot us, man. You know? Yeah. And I was saying I was angry, so I thought I was trying to toy with the sniper by filming above the because there was a wall, you know. And we didn't get any directs incoming after that. And these ISOF guys came up the stairs, and we said, get down, there's a sniper. And they go, we'll be fine, inshallah. If we went to get shot, we'll get shot. And that's the problem that we saw a lot, was that the Iraqis, whether they were civilians or ISOF, they were just like that. Like, there was this one guy around about the same time he was shot at the second time. He sat at the top of the ISOF Humvee on his mobile phone in clear view, and next to him was a cemetery that was probably 300 by 300. Mm-hmm. It's an easy target if someone had been watching at that point, you know.
Yeah.
But he didn't get hit, and it was chaos, man. It was like that all day, and that night. This is a funny story. So that night, I can't remember if it was that night or another night, but the Green Beret dude said, no, I asked him. I said, do you think I'd be able to stay at the FOB, Forward Operating Base? And because the team that I was with would go in there for meals and stuff. And he goes, yeah, it's probably fine. So I went in there with him for a meal. And, dude, that's the best meal I had the whole trip. Mm-hmm. It was an American chef, really well set up Forward Operating Base, right near the front. And it was pork chops, and they were awesome. They were fucking awesome. I had like 3 servings.
Yeah.
But and actually, while we're eating lunch, when I went back for seconds, there wasn't too many people in there. I ended up sitting with Eddie Gallagher.
Oh yeah,
In,
yep.
yeah, and another SEAL. And he said, "Man, what are you doing here?" And I explained what I was doing here, and he said, he's telling me about his long Navy career and
Hmm.
how it's maybe time to get out soon. And and the other dude said he'd been deployed to Mosul 7 times or something.
So what year was that? Because I know there's like an expanse of time of Mosul.
97. No, sorry, 2017.
17. Okay. All right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because it's like in my head, things are just, I remember when they took ISIS started taking Iraq back in like 2014. So I remember there was like a pretty few years there where guys were starting to go back in. And so I was, trying to figure out what years those were. That's wild, man. And
Yeah, and that offensive took like 6 months, I think.
yeah. Yeah.
It was
So
a
that's
long
just,
one.
so that's just like, so it was just chaos then. I mean, it was just like bombs dropping,
Yeah, it was
and
insane.
yeah, it was insane. So this is more of the nerd in me. When you're logistically doing combat photography, like we met, and I was doing volunteering, so I wasn't doing the combat photography side of the house. But when you're doing something like Mosul, and I remember back then even flirting with the idea of going to Iraq back in like 14, 15 while I was in film school to like, hey, maybe I should go film some of this or whatever. How did you logistically move around? Sometimes it's like, because I'm part of the military, or I was military, so I'm like, oh, there's a fob. I get there's food, or we have MREs, or we have water coming in. Like, you're on your own as a combat photographer. Like, well, what is that? Especially in Mosul at that time. Like, how did you guys maneuver, and how did you guys get from one spot to another, and
Mate,
all that
it's
stuff?
do you know that famous photographer, the British one?
Oh
His
yeah, it
name,
was
it just popped
not
out of my head.
not Sebastian Younger. It was that's the other one. It's
What's his name?
I know. I can.
Don McCullum. Don McCullum.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Yeah. I went to actually his thing in London, his gallery. But so what he did starting off is he would do street photography.
Hmm.
And then he's like, I need to do something more exciting. And he heard about a war in Africa. And he's like, contacted a newspaper and said, would you buy the pictures in the story if I did this? Let's go, yeah, if it's good, yeah. So he found a way to get there himself, had no contacts on the ground, made contacts, and just that's how he did his career. And after a while, he made loads of contacts and it was a lot easier.
Hmm.
But the similar thing was for me is that, man, I was going there not blind. Well, yes, I kind of was in the beginning, but I had this contact max. So as long as I got to their CCP, I was good. But to get there was a real mission.
Hmm.
The 20 checkpoints and getting rejected a few times, and then the fixer talking his way through it and getting us in there. Man, when I went to Iraq, because I'd done so much research on it, I slept with a knife under my pillow. In fact, I'd sleep like this most nights, regardless of where I was in the country. And, I put my aluminium foil around my mobile phone. I didn't want to get tracked,
Hmm.
because I was a Westerner
Yeah.
in this country, not because of anything else. I was just like, I don't want to be taken captive and sit in a cell or be beheaded or anything like that. So I was kind of like the paranoid cop that I used to do in the undercover days. I was watching left and right and, 360 degrees all the time, hiding my phone when I didn't need to use it, doing everything I possibly could, sending GPS coordinates to people to say, hey, I'm meant to be at this location. If you don't hear from me in 24 hours, then something's happened. Because I don't have a support network. I don't have a drone. I don't have an army. I don't have anything. You just got to wing it.
Yeah.
There's a really good movie, a Danish movie about a Danish photojournalist who was caught in Syria. Daniel Rye was his name. And he was actually spent time in cell with that American who was beheaded. His name, I just forgotten his name.
Is that the famous one that went around
Yeah.
Iraq? I remember watching that one way back in the day. Yeah. Yep.
He was in prison with him, but he was just unfortunate when he was caught. He was on his second trip to a conflict zone, and he had a fixer who told him everything was good, and he just ended up the wrong place at the wrong time, was stopped by two guys who contacted other guys and said, who are these people? And the other guys ended up giving him up to ISIS. So he spent, I think it's called 18 months, the movie, or 13 months in prison with ISIS, and he befriended this American. He actually memorized what the American told him in the ISIS prison and said it at this American's funeral in America afterwards, after he got out. Because his family raised enough money to get him out of Syria in the end, so he was freed.
Mm-hmm.
But like him, you could just go around the wrong corner and you're screwed. One point, I was with this NGO, really lovely people, and we went to the highest ranking Yazidi clan member was in the country at the time, and security was insane. And that was during, the Mosul offensive. And I'm thinking, if they want to take out a high Yazidi guy, because, they nearly wiped out the Yazidis.
Mm-hmm.
If they take out this guy, that's huge. So I was waiting for something to happen there, and the security was basically these old guys with M4s, these Kurdish guys. And it was, anything could have happened. We could have turned around a wrong corner. I was thinking, as we're driving on the way back, are we getting tailed? Was anyone following us, Because I was with white Westerners in a four-wheel drive.
Yeah.
That was just it wasn't protected. It had no ballistic protection. So you're just constantly on the lookout, like 24/7 while you're over there. If it's Ukraine or if it's Iraq, you've got your head on the swivel the whole time.
So it's really cool to hear you say that, because that's something that, like, I feel like people get trained on. So I imagine your police training, especially being in the covert operations and doing all the drug deals, all that translated into basically like having situational awareness. Because sometimes, it's like, sometimes it's such a simple thing, but it does translate greatly when you step into the high stress combat zones. Because I'm sure you've ran into them. I'm sure some other people, but like, you're just like the situational awareness that they don't have, because they're just like, oh, I've never been trained. I've whatever. This is interesting. And then they're going into a combat zone and they have no idea. Like you said, like what you said, there was like, I was sending GPS coordinates. Like we did the same thing. It's like, here's our GPS coordinates. We're checking in with people.
You did that in Ukraine, you mean?
Yeah. Like in Ukraine, I was like, I'm going here. I'm meeting up with a buddy's friend who I trust, but I'm still going like 4 floors up, and I don't know who they're loyal to. I'm assuming they're loyal to Ukraine. I mean, at the time you could kind of feel that, but I mean, there's still like Russian assets running around Lviv. So, I was like, I'm getting here. I'm about to go in 5 minutes. If I'm not back in like an hour, get somebody, here's my last location in this building, And there's a few times I walked up, and I remember walking up the flights. I was like, fuck, is this a bad idea? Am I making, so this is Eastern Bloc, like this shit goes wild. Yeah. So, but it's cool to hear you say that, because I feel like, even myself I haven't done the full combat photographer route, but I've always wanted to. But it's also really hard to, like, I love what you're saying, because that's like really good information for people that maybe want to get into it, or like, maybe I should. I think it's a little bit more, I won't say easy to access, but it's a little, like, you can Google a bit more. Cause I remember back in 2014, I was trying to figure out, like, how do I get in? I remember seeing, Restrepo, the people that went out to Korengal, and you're like, well, how do they do it? What's the logistics? Like, I was a contractor, so my company was paying for the food. They were paying for this. Like, what's the logistics? And then also, like, how do you act? And then me coming from my background, like, I knew how to act in the combat zone. It was almost like, but how do I get there, and how do I get food, or how, you know what I mean? Or like, you're living off the economy. So those are just like, it's cool to hear you say that, where you're like, I slept with a knife. You had check-ins. You knew what you were doing. And I feel like sometimes journalists, even though it's wrong place, wrong time, sometimes I feel like they just don't know what they're doing, and they're just like, whoa,
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and then shit starts going off, and they're just now they're a liability, So
yeah, they are. Like, there's this dude in Mosul I was watching him. He was doing Instagram live feeds of his location.
No shit.
What an idiot.
Yeah.
Instagram live feed of your location. All they had to do was send a drone over and nail that dude,
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm off comms while I'm here. I'm just here to do what I need to do and get out safely. So when I was at that FOB, I met, I had a little bit to do with Chuck Keating. He was a Navy SEAL that was killed in.
I've heard about him. Yeah. And that was during Mosul, or that was
he was killed north of it in a place called Telskuf, and he was in a QRF, and he was killed. And anyway, when I went there, I was wearing this patch on my hat. And that's his mate. It's called Ert. It's a surf brand in California. And he was mates with Chuck, and he couldn't say anything about Chuck, but Chuck used to wear these patches everywhere when he went to war. And anyway, I was wearing it, and this Australian commando, he says, what are you doing with a seal patch on your hat? And I said, it's a surfing brand for Californians, for Chuck. He goes, that's stupid, man. That's dangerous. I'm like, it's just a fucking patch on a hat, man. What, chill out. And I ended up meeting Chuck's brother, who's also a SEAL, and his teammates. And the guy sitting with Eddie Gallagher, who I had lunch with, I saw him again a bit later and said, hey, mate, can I ask you something? When I was in the fob, and I said, I got told off by this commando for wearing this hat. This patch? He goes, do you want to meet his brother? I said, fuck yeah. So he took me over to the tent and met his brother and his teammates. His brother said, mate, just wear it. I'm glad you wear it. You should wear it. You're doing it for a good reason. And that story actually led to me getting kicked out at gunpoint of the fob at 1 o'clock in the morning in Mosul.
Really?
Because I was sleeping in this tent with some Rangers and some other guys, and there was a spare bed that I took. And 1 o'clock in the morning, in comes an Australian officer with 2 82nd Airborne guys. Who the fuck are you? How the fuck did you get in here? You are a civilian. This is your fucking, what did you say? You're a spy, aren't you? And I said, are you fucking kidding me? I'm as Australian as they get, as patriotic as they get. He says, I don't give a fuck. You're out of here. And so he leaves, and then a junior officer comes, and the 82nd guys, with their M4s, you got to go. So I packed my stuff. And the reason that happened is because I tried to get an embed with all the units in that fob. I asked the 82nd, I asked the Rangers, I asked the SEALs, I asked the Australian Commandos if I could do a day or two with them. They get my memory card, get to delete the pictures they don't want me to show, and then let me keep the ones that I can, know. And word got around the camp that there's this Aussie there, which sucked because I met all these Aussies. They were awesome. They had this barbecue, and I joined them for a bit. But anyway, so I get marched out, and this junior officer, he says, we're just an engineering logistics team here. And I said, yeah, okay, mate, sure. And they're all commandos. It's fucking obvious. But I didn't want to, And he said, you've got to go, but this is a number you can call us if the shit hits the fan. And he said, good luck. Yeah. So I left, and at that point there was blast barriers 50 metres apart. There was blast barriers, inner blast barriers and outer. And I had to walk the 50 metres to the outer blast barriers at 1 o'clock in the morning with a headlight waving to the Iraqis saying, don't shoot, friendly, don't shoot. Because they weren't expecting anyone without notice that someone was coming. That was fucking scary. I was just waiting for fucking shots to ring out, actually.
Yeah. I hate to say it, too, because that's the Iraqis and the Afghans we work with. I mean, they can be trigger happy. So that's of everything you're doing, that's probably the scariest thing.
Yeah,
you're because you're like, I'm here, and then they're just like, fuck it, and then they just start lighting you up.
Exactly. I thought that's exactly what was going to happen, but luckily it didn't. And I get to the outer blast barriers, and here I am in the Mosul streets. The Iraqis don't speak English. They're looking at me. What the fuck, whatever. And I'm like. And I had a little bit of credit on my phone to call this Norwegian Max on WhatsApp or whatever it was I used back then, Signal, whatever. And Max, I've got no credit. Can you come and pick him up? I'm outside the fob being kicked out. He goes, yeah, I'll come. So I waited there. That was, longest time in history. It's longer than doing longer than planking, Jesus, it felt like it forever. And
just basically ass hanging in the breeze in Mosul.
Hanging in the breeze. But luckily I got picked up and went back to a house where we ended up staying for a while, and it was a traditional ISIS house, had holes in the walls so they could get from building to building. The front door didn't work, and Iraqi Special Forces were hanging with us, but I didn't trust them. I remember there was this one, I don't know if he was Special Forces or not, maybe it was just regular, but he was looking at me like he wanted to kill me. And he did it a few times throughout the day when I met this guy, and I'm like, this dude's fucking sus. I've got to watch my back with this guy. Really, looking through me type thing. And he saw where we were staying in this little hut because he was in one of the pickups behind us. And that stayed in my head, and I'm like, okay, this is dangerous. So that night, we all slept on the floor, and I did the old knife in the chest again because I was right next to the door. I figured if someone comes out, at least I get something, But I didn't know that the guys I was with had an AK. They didn't tell me because they weren't officially allowed to have one, but the Iraqis gave them one because we were the places we went to. And I would have slept a little bit better if I had known that we had a weapon. I didn't know that. Yeah. So that was I didn't know if I even got a wink of sleep that night. But but what we found out later is that some Canadian volunteers went kind of on the loose in Mosul and went out looking for firefights with the ISIS fighters in a pickup that they had to use for humanitarian reasons. And they were caught by the Iraqis, kicked out of the country, and then it stopped. Like, after that point, it was almost impossible to get in as a civilian to the front lines. They really put on the brakes.
So the Canadians wanted to get the story from the ISIS perspective or something like that?
No, they wanted a firefight. They wanted to go and shoot him.
So they were just like, we're going to go fight ISIS.
Yeah.
And then, okay. And they just got caught.
Got caught.
Okay.
Yeah, so a lot changed after that. And I was meant to head back again a month later to catch up with his awesome American medic. Clint is his name. Is his name. He spent 6 months embedded with ISOF Battalion 3, Golden Division 3. And he said to me, man, you won't get in. This has just happened, and it's impossible now. You could try, but there are no guarantees. And he said, and it's even getting a lot worse for us. We're getting suicide bombers coming into every compound that we stay in. So, but I still booked my tickets, turned up at the airport, and the airline, I booked it through one of those, travel websites, Apparel, whatever it was, and they fucked up my tickets. I couldn't get on the flight. So I figured, okay, it wasn't meant to be.
Yeah.
So I went back in 2019 and spent time with the Peshmerga commandos, and also went to the location that Chuck Keating was killed in Tel Aviv, and buried one of his T-shirts there. And actually found a spent 5.56 casing that the SEALs would have used during that battle, and kept it and put it on a necklace, because what I did on the first trip is I tried to take with me out of Iraq a 50 cal shell casing, a grenade shell casing, shrapnel, and all this other shit. Yeah. And I don't know if you went to that airport, but there was like 3 levels of X-rays as you go through the airport. And they got me on the last one.
Yeah. We had done, it was really funny. It was through Iraq, but like my buddies had gotten hit with shrapnel, like we got hit with mortars, and that was when the mortar went through our room. So they had like thick shrapnel. In fact, my buddy to this day, who is the Ukrainian, I think he still pulls out small pieces, but we got back anyways. So we went through the metal detectors, and they just kept setting them off, and they're like, what do you have? And he would just show them his arm, and you could see the metal in his arm, and they're just like, oh yeah, go, but yeah, we were, I think I don't know if I still have it. I think I got a piece of a mortar round that like missed us. And I swear to God, I have it somewhere. I could have swore I got it. I put it in the buttstock of my rifle.
In Afghanistan?
No, this is Iraq. This is my first deployment. And it was stupid. They're just like, no war trophies, can't bring anything back. I'm like, this is a piece of shrapnel that missed us. Like, who gives a fuck? But they were super anal about it. And I believe I got it back, and I think it's somewhere.
Hope you find it.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, it's just one of those things where it's like I had it for years, like in the Marine Corps, and it's like I hope I didn't lose it somewhere. But yeah, so it's crazy to hear. I mean, like, so you went, Mosul. So you went back in 2019, or you said you went back in 2019, correct? And so what was that like then? Because when it started calming down, I mean, even I'm sure you probably track it a little more than I do. What's the situation like now, or even back in 2019? Was it just because they had basically kicked out ISIS, right? And then
I would say that between now and 2019, it's very similar. When I went out with the Peshmerga, there was no fighting. I think there'd been a couple of car bombs, but really not much going on. But that second trip, I stayed. There's nothing I really want to touch on. Is I stayed with this Christian family, awesome family, who lived. A man and woman lived with their children in Iraq, northern Iraq, and Kurdistan. And just down the road was an area where a lot of Iranians lived who hated Americans. So he would never drive down that area because they would know who he was. I think he's told me that sometimes they would throw things at his car and stuff. And I thought afterwards, I would never, ever, ever live in a zone like that with my children. And I said to him, but just awesome people, this Christian family, lovely. I stay in touch with them now still. And I said to him, mate, what happens if someone comes through your door with AK-47s? What are you going to do? And he said, I don't know. I said, well, do you have a weapon in the house? He said, no, we don't have weapons. He said, I got a baseball bat. I said, a baseball bat is not going to do anything against an AK-47. So you have kids, so you need to make some sort of plan as to what you would do if it happened. Who are you going to call? Which door or exit are you going to go through? Is it going to be a window? Can you jump to the ground from the window? Have a plan. So I think maybe he did that after, but I actually made a plan myself. Because I stayed there for a few days. And but on one day, we were there just after Trump killed that Iranian general.
Yep.
Yeah. And he told me, don't come because the threat level is super high. And I said, I booked my tickets. I'm coming. And when I get there, he was considering pulling the family out. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, I'm going to think about it. And I said, well, mate, family's family. You know, the mission you're on can wait. Mm-hmm. But so what we did, he said, well, I'm going to think about it, but I want to take you to a special place in Kurdistan. So we went to this place near the Iranian border. I didn't know it was near the Iranian border until we got there. This beautiful mountain area, just stunning, man. Like snow-tipped mountains and this beautiful grass, this bit of water. I got these awesome pictures of the reflection of the clouds in this water, just pristine. We go to this other area, and he said, look at the top of that mountain. And I said, oh, what is that? He said, that's an Iranian outpost. I said, what the fuck are we doing near an Iranian outpost? When we've just been told that we're probably going to get hammered by the Iranians now because you killed one of the generals. I said, we need to leave, man. Because I didn't know, you know. And he's going, oh, yeah, maybe we should. And then as we're there, I've got it on a video. He gets a phone call. Was it a phone call or an emergency SMS? And he reads it out and he says, all Americans have been informed to leave Iraq immediately. Critical threat level, you know?
Yeah.
As we're standing there looking at the Iranian fucking border, and I said, we need to go, mate. And So anyway, we leave, we start driving. And it's kind of like Afghanistan, that part of I haven't been to Afghanistan, but, you know, footage I've seen is that it's mountainous and there's all these tiny dodgy roads and things like that, stones and shit. And so we're driving on this road and all of a sudden I hear this noise like a nuclear warning noise, you know, that weird noise, super loud siren.
The siren, yeah.
Not like a bomb siren, but like a nuclear siren. There's kind of a difference. And I'm like, what the fuck? And I look at the window, I thought drones were following us or something. I said, what is that sound, man?
Yeah.
And because I was super paranoid. And ended up being, he had an iPhone next to him. And if you press certain parts of it at the same time for a certain amount of time, it sets off this SOS alarm sound. I never knew that. And he didn't know it either because he's like, what the fuck is this? We found out later.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's just one of those situations where I would love if I could have spent my time in Iraq like he did, where he didn't think about the dangers. He thought about the mission and doing the right thing by God and helping, you know. Yeah. I mean, he opened, him and Tim, this other guy, opened all these refugee camps that I visited and interviewed loads of people who'd been through all sorts of atrocities, and just a wonderful, wonderful man and family. But he wasn't doing this all the time. He was just living his life, driving his car, going for walks, doing the garden and preaching it. You know, if only we could all be like that, you know. But I'm just not built that way, so I can't do it.
Yeah, I think too. I think there's a little bit of, a little bit of calmness and ignorance. You know, you're like, oh, I'm here to mission. They don't care about me, and then you just kind of go about your day, even though it's like, you know, I think they've probably been watching you, you know, or like your, you know, head's not on a swivel. But yeah, it is. Sometimes you're like, man, that would be nice to, you know, because that was like it was in Afghanistan. Like some of these families are just like, whatever, man. You know, like I just live my life and go about it. And,
you mean the local families?
Local families. You know,
but this dude was American.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's what I'm saying. Is even, but as an American, you're just like, oh my god, like it's another world, you know. And it's awesome. I've heard about the Kurdistan area, and I always love to go.
It's awesome.
About the mountains and everything like that. And I've heard
about
they got
a ski center.
Yeah. I've seen like little mini YouTube docs on it, and they're like, oh yeah, this is where you go skiing, and this is whatever. I think they cleared mines out of it at one point because it used to be like mined or whatever.
Yeah. Well, actually, this guy Bill, he was it before my first trip? He had a visit from two Marines. Mm-hmm. We contacted him and said, hey, we're traveling through Kurdistan. Can we stop and say hello? And he did. He met them, and they stayed, I think, for a day or two with him. Went up to the ski field, and they said, we are blown away about how we can travel around this country without being in a military convoy.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, we see it in such a different perspective. Or the beauty of the people, you get to know them.
Mm-hmm.
But to be fair, that is Kurdistan. It's not in Baghdad they're doing it. But so that's just the different perspectives that you get, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the thing too, is there was actually a little mini North Face documentary where they took veterans, like 3 veterans up, and they like, the whole thing was about them getting up to Kurdistan and
maybe that's
down.
the guys, actually.
It might have been it, yeah, because they were like filming a little doc. I think there's like 3 of them. It was like one, I think it was
that
Marine.
probably was there.
Yeah. And there was kind of like this, you know, the documentary is all about like the spiritual side of it. But I was like, oh man, that's like really cool, like the way they maneuvered around. And even my buddy Marty had been in Kurdistan, and that's a different place opposed to, you know, like you said, Baghdad or Mosul.
Yeah.
Like those are, like, my experience in Iraq is not that. Like it is, I couldn't care to go back to that place.
Yeah.
But it's cool to hear like your perspective and other people's perspective of Kurdistan, because Afghanistan to me is, I love Afghanistan, but I was also in the Northeast and whatnot, where people in the South, they're like, fuck that place. Because it's way more desert. It's just, there are mountains, but it's like it's like desert mountain terrain, much more flat. You know, IEDs were insane. Whereas like where I was at was like the beautiful mountain landscapes and like rolling hills and in villages tucked into little valleys, and it was insane. You know how it was, like, I would say magical. It was, as a weird word, but you know, it's
some of it looks pretty.
It blows you away, because there's a whole village that we couldn't get to, and there's just not massive buildings, but like brick buildings. You're like, there they are. Like, this is like something out of like a novel. Like you got to travel to the village in the mountain, you know? So yeah, that's awesome. So how did you end up getting shifted in, you know, going from Mosul and now boom, Ukraine kicks off? You know, how did you get in Ukraine?
Well, as soon as it kicked off, you know, I wasn't interested before, like 2014, that period of time, I wasn't interested. But as soon as it kicked off the second time, I knew people going there, volunteers, demining, and people just humanitarian work. And I thought, I'd like to document this because this is new, this is fresh. So it kicked off in February, and I was there in March when you were there, yeah?
Yeah.
That
was March. Yeah, I was there. I got in like March 14th, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And but the thing is, it was I was traveling with this guy who was an absolute pain in the ass. I don't want to talk about him, but which kind of ruined a bit of the trip. But look, because he was pissed because we didn't get to go to the regions we wanted to go to. We wanted to go to Odessa. We wanted to go to Kiev and Kharkiv. Mm-hmm. But we just couldn't get there because it was a logistical nightmare. The war was new.
Yeah.
You needed passwords. We didn't have the passwords. We ended up booking a trip with someone through a fixer friend who was going to drive us to Odessa for, I can't remember, 500 US back and forth, so we could get there and document it a bit and come back. He pulled out at 3 o'clock in the morning. He said, it's just too dangerous. And then this dude I was traveling with was pissed, and he started yelling at me and stuff. I said, it's war, man. You cannot fucking plan this shit. You know, you can try, but things shift and change all the time. So we did not get to leave Lviv on that first trip. So what I ended up doing is, did you meet Swampy? Did I introduce you to Swampy?
Yeah, met Swampy. Yeah. I'm bummed out I couldn't get to link up with him again. I know Chris is heading back on the 4th. He's actually driving with Swampy from Europe into Ukraine with supplies.
Okay, nice.
So yeah. So he wanted me to come. I'm like, I'd love to, man. Like, but gotta get paid.
Yeah.
You know, like I'd love to. I could do it, but my time's money these days. So, Swampy was amazing. Swampy, it was like such a crazy thing because like I'm sitting here talking with Swampy, and now it's like we're doing volunteer work. We're also, and it was Wild West. I think when people talk about, I mean, they're talking about like 4G, like forming. There's money that at one point that they were going to form basically like a mercenary army, but it would have been like foreign volunteers. And so he was like possibly putting something together with that. But then he's also doing the EOD stuff. And it's just like, it was just like, hey man, what do you got? And we're just going back and forth, like trying to problem solve. And it was just so wild. Like it was just the Wild West, you know, every day was different, you know. Russians were like the lines were just going back and forth. You know what I mean? They're like, they lost an artillery unit here, but the Russians have 20 vehicles over here. Now they push, and then it was insane. You didn't know what the outcome was going to be. But yeah, Swampy was awesome. Yeah, he was great.
Yeah, I guess for those listening in, he's ex-British EOD guy who's basically served in Ukraine since 2014, on and off.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He actually did some work in Borneo before that, I think.
Yeah. And it's we've been wanting to do a story on him. That was one of the ones we pitched for Project Leaflet. It was trying to get, because he was doing, I think that's what also Chris is doing. So he's going to be getting in a little bit deeper. But yeah, those first few weeks or months, because I knew guys that, like, you've gone back, other guys had gone and then gone back. I don't want to say it's easier to get to the front line, but at that point there was the Ukrainians had on lockdown, because I remember just for us trying to do missions on volunteering of trying to get people in and out, it was like checkpoint and checkpoint and checkpoint. We even had passes for the Ministry of Defense, like MOD, so we could get past. But even then, they were like, "You're gonna have to have somebody come with you." Yeah. They're gonna wonder what you're doing. Yes, you will get past. So I got stopped. We got stopped, and I was like, yeah, American, here's my passport, here's my MOD letter. And they still search the vehicle. It's still, and like, I got it, like it's a different dynamic, I think, than like the counterinsurgency wars or something like that. Like, it's just, they are facing a nation, they are facing someone who knows what they're doing. Like it's, so, but yeah, it was awesome. Like I said, we met there, and then just seeing like everything. It was weird, because then Lviv itself was like phenomenal. So my wife was pissed that I even went, and then I was like, honestly, you'd like it. Like, it's a really nice place. I was like, coffee's great. It's got some cool sights, and whatnot. But I was like, we gotta go back to Ukraine when the war's over. This is really cool. But yeah, dude,
And Lviv is nothing to compare to Odessa. Odessa's beautiful. Kharkiv is really nice as well. Got an awesome zoo there. I mean, there's some really nice places in that country. Mm-hmm. But that first trip was a bit of a letdown. I mean, the only thing we did is there's only one, when we were there was only one missile attack that hit about a kilometre from us. Mm-hmm. I remember actually I was with Swampy, and we're staying in this dilapidated, what do you call it? Just a shit building, basically a shell of a building with concrete floors and carpet that, it stank. It'd been obviously there for 30 years, and rats and all sorts of shit been up. But we slept on it, and Swampy comes in the room at it was about 5 o'clock in the morning. Air raid. And I've got, oh fuck, okay. So I get up and I put my plate carrier on the wrong way.
Yeah.
Like the rear and the front are like this, and I've run out. I didn't even do it up. I was like, and the first missile hit, and then a second one was incoming. We could hear it. And I actually thought to myself, I don't want to stay in this building if it hits, because no one's going to get us out of that. Like, it was an old building, and the bunker was actually really good, but we're screwed in that bunker, Yeah. And I thought, fuck it. So I went out into the street a bit to the left behind a wall, and when the second one hit, and that was pretty much the only thing that happened that trip. So I just helped out, did some humanitarian work at the train station, lifting boxes, and did that for about a day, and then helped some injured, and just took pictures. And there was really no story with that trip. But it was kind of good to get to know the system in Ukraine. Like, I had good connections by that stage. Mm-hmm. In fact, the whole way I met up with, the Global Surgical Medical Group guys.
Yeah. Yep.
Because I know one of those. I was actually meant to join him for the Afghanistan, the Kabul pullouts. He had a seat for me in a C-130, but my boss wouldn't let me go at the time. Fucking pissed off. But so I met up with him, met up with you, Swampy, and I've got a friend over there who helps me out all the time to get logistically and get into places. So I've got a really good setup now. That's why I went back 2 more times. Mm-hmm. And the guy who picked me up from Warsaw to drive me to the border was a contact through Swampy. And he was at that time an ex-Ukrainian soldier doing taxi work in Poland, and he said he's going back as soon as possible to start fighting. And the stories, man, about that guy are unbelievable. So every time I go back, I go and see him, and every time I go back, he's in hospital after being injured in battle.
Yeah.
Once a tank shot a round, it hit a wall, landed on him because he was sniping from this roof. Woke up in hospital, this neck brace, and the surgeon said, you cannot go back to war. And he left the hospital and went back to war anyway. Then he got trained as a sniper. You know that Ukrainian sniper rifle looks like an American sniper rifle.
Yeah.
Kind of looks like a 417, HK 417. And so he was trained up on that as a sniper, and he went to Bakhmut for a month, and he was injured. They took a massive chunk of his arm with a mortar strike the day before the Russians took Bakhmut. And he said 2 survived out of the 60 he was with, and the other one was in the hospital full of bullet holes and wasn't probably going to survive.
Jesus.
Yeah, and so when on that trip, he gave me his pants and he said, "This is something for you to remember what we're doing over here." So I have his blade suck pants pants at home, and I wrote a story about him just to try and keep what he's doing alive. So the last 2 trips, the second one I spent time with Swampy's team, the EOD team. We did some clearing in Iraqi and that place right next to it, which was the subject of a massacre. I can't remember what it's called. And dude, that trip. So we go and I said to the guys, we're at this area where they collected all the bombs, and I was taking pictures, but it was fucking boring. Like the Ukrainian police EOD team was there, we were there, and they were doing some training how to defuse these certain bombs and letting a couple go off. And I said, man, can we actually do something, exciting? And the boys were like, yeah, we agree. These 2 guys I was with. So the next day we went to this Russian staging area near Irpin, and it was massive. Like it was probably 1 kilometre in diameter, full of these massive tank trenches, and had bunker networks. It had like commander rooms and everything, man. But as we're going in there, we drive through this little lane. There's a security guy, a Ukrainian, a soldier, and he goes and he sees the car. It's painted like a military vehicle. The boys are wearing, multicam uniforms, and he just waves us through. As we're driving, I said to the guys, "Has this been cleared yet?" And they said, "No." I went, "Oh, fuck."
Yeah.
So, and I said, "What about the tracks that we're driving on?" And he said, "We're just going to follow these other tracks that this other car drive on, and we'll be fine."
Yeah.
I'm like, "You're fucking kidding me, man." And so we get to this area where there was the Russians had got rid of trees so that the tanks could turn around. And so we get there, and we put on all the protective kit, and then what I thought I would do is I would just follow their footsteps because they hadn't been cleared, and they would use mine detectors, but they didn't have mine detectors. They used sticks to prod. And dude, they are mini jogging in this area, and I couldn't keep up with the footsteps. So I'm like, fuck it, I just have to go my own way and do my own thing because they were busy. I got a few pictures, and I'm like, fuck, they're just going too fast. So I'm treading lightly, which obviously is not going to help if you stand on one anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
But psychologically, in the beginning, I was like, this might help. And then anyway, I find this tank that had been hit by a missile, and there was shrapnel in the tree, so I took out some shrapnel, and there's a tank ID plate that I took. And I start walking back to the boys, and I hear a whoosh, bang, explosion. I'm like, fuck. One of the boys has stood on an IED. Fuck.
Yeah.
And I'm in this area, and how the fuck am I going to get back to them,
Yeah.
And I've got it on I took a one of those helmet cameras, what are they called?
GoPros?
No, the proper ones. I can't remember. The rounded ones that go on your helmet and fit really nice.
Okay.
I can't remember. But so I got it on film, and I'm on my knee. I took a knee. I'm like, guys, you're okay? You're okay? And eventually I hear laughing. I've gone, what the fuck? And so you guys okay? I'm saying this as I'm going over towards him. And I get there, and one of the guys has taken off his helmet. He's sweating. His face is red. He's got a smoke. I said, what happened? And what he'd done is he'd stood on a tripwire flare that the Russians had left that went whoosh, boom, He tripped over it. And so he thought he was dead as well. And so I'm like, oh, my God, this is just so insane. So from that point onwards, I followed each footstep they left in the sand,
Yeah.
And I found a Russian Special Forces T-shirt, so I kept that. And then we went and cleared another area where actually, like I'm going to be honest, in the second area that they were clearing, I ended up halfway through their clearance walking along the road because I just didn't think it was worth it. It was just too dangerous. And the boys kept going, procking with their sticks. I'm like, I'm sticking to the road. I'm going to get pictures of you from the road.
Yeah.
And of course, nothing happened, so we left. And then the last trip I did, I caught up with a Norwegian who rescues animals on the front lines. And I said, hey, mate, I'd love to share your story. Can I join you on a mission? He said, yep. So after I visited my friend in hospital again, I went to Kharkiv and met up with him. And we went to Advika. That's that city that's being flattened right now. It's just south of Bakhmut. You've probably seen it in the news. It's been on the news almost daily. So he said it's heavy, but we're going to go there because there's a dog I need to find and I need to deliver half a ton of food. I said, cool, man. So we go there. He's got this Tundra pickup, you know, those Toyotas.
Yep, yeah.
Awesome car. But he's decked it out. It looks like a SWAT vehicle.
Yeah.
And I said, hang on, man, isn't this going to be like the Russians are going to see this and think, hey, we're like a SWAT team or something coming in? And he goes, well, they might do, but it's just the way it is. You know?
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, fine. And we go through all these checkpoints. And again, we had the paperwork, but like you, they wanted to check it. And we nearly got rejected twice. We go in and we get to this roundabout. And he turns left down this roundabout. And we're driving down this road, open fields, and it just felt off to me. And I said, we going the right way? Because he used a GPS, and sometimes a GPS would, because the jamming signals, I think that it wouldn't work sometimes. So then he had an old map on his phone from the last trip that he did, but he went the wrong way. We were going towards the Russians.
Ooh.
And even the Ukrainian guards were like, why the fuck are you going down that way? And I said nothing because I assumed this guy knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
And we drove for probably a kilometre, maybe two, I don't remember. And I was just like, I just had this feeling. And he goes, and I said, can we check? So he stops in the middle of the road in his fucking clearing area to look at the GPS and get the coordinates. I'm like, if there's a drone, we're fucked. But luckily there wasn't. And he goes, actually, you know what? We need to go back because we were meant to go straight ahead. So we turn around, we go straight ahead. And then we get to this bridge. We're about 4 Ks out of Advika. And we stop under this bridge, and actually these Ukrainians had stopped there too because you couldn't be seen from under the bridge by air. And we put on our kit, and Ukrainians did as well, actually. And they drove in one direction, and we drove in this other direction towards Advika. And after about a kilometre, we started to get targeted by mortars. So as we're driving, he's driving on that side, I'm sitting here, and these mortars go boom, boom to the right. I'm going, fuck, that was close, man. He said, was it outgoing? And I said, no, I'm pretty sure that's incoming, you know. And he picks up the speed. So we're doing 180 kilometres an hour on this dirt road, you know, the side road. And then comes another one, bang. And then another one, bang. And they just get closer and closer. And I said, fuck, man, they have us in their sights. We need to get the fuck out of here. So I don't know how many landed, man, but that last one was 20 metres away. It was so close.
Yeah, they were trying to get you.
Yeah, but we were lucky because the field the rounds were hitting, it was mud. So you would hear an explosion, like a thump.
Yeah.
So if it had hit the pavement where we were, we would have splintered and we would have been fucked, but we were kind of lucky in that regards. And they actually, every round that they fired was a little bit too long. They didn't shoot any too short. It was like just to the right of us. Anyway, we get in there and it was weird, man. It was like, I guess it was like Bakhmut in the middle stages where it was severely bombed but not completely flattened. All the buildings were damaged. All the windows were broken. There was a destroyed Russian APC by the road. And then we get in there. It was a bit, I think we were a bit lucky too. I'm sure we were targeted by mortars and obviously not drones because the weather wasn't all that good. So I don't know if they would have been using drones at that point. There's a little bit of rain and it was quite foggy. And so we get in and so the bombs are going off in the city. You can see Grad rockets that are embedded in the roads. And anyway, so the point was to find this dog and deliver the dog food. So we stopped at this one point and I run down the stairs and I find this lady and there's this bunker shelter where this lady was living with her son and some locals where they would stock food for people. I don't even know if they sold it or if they just gave it to the locals because there was nothing there, man, you know. So when we arrived, they hadn't had dog food for I don't know how long and they were just like, they started crying, thank you, and gave us hugs and stuff and helped us with the food. So we take off the half ton of dog food and then Frederick, this guy was with, says, now we need to find this dog. And he asked them, and they said, we think we know where it is. So we walked through the streets, bombs are going off, not that close to us, but in the city where we were, and that's not a big city. And so we get to the building, and out comes a Ukrainian soldier from this bunker with this dog that he'd been looking for. Mm-hmm. So we found this awesome German Shepherd, super friendly dog. And then we walk back and get to the car, and I said to this guy, Frederick, I said, cool, man, that's just awesome. We got this dog. Let's get out of here. And this guy, what he does, he tries to raise money to support what he does. He uses his own money, his own investment money, but he also tries to raise money from the public. So he needs footage of what goes on. That's why I joined him. I said, listen, I'll take pictures and get it on film. So as we're leaving, he stops the car. Well, no, he was driving about 10 kilometres an hour while he fixes a camera on the dashboard to catch the bombs coming in, and then another camera on different angles to get all this footage. And I said, what are you doing, man? He goes, I'm just trying to get some footage. I said, we just got the dog, delivered the food. If we get killed now, what the fuck was the point, man? I said, we need to leave, and we need to leave now fast.
Yeah.
And so after a while, he goes, yeah, cool. And I said, look, give me the camera and I'll hold it here and I'll film, you know. And anyway, on the way back, we didn't get targeted. I don't know why, but we didn't, which was good. And we got out of there. And that was I needed a beer after that one, man. That was super close. It was crazy how close that was.
Yeah.
And I said I said a little prayer. I said, you know what, if I get out of this, then I'll be a good boy and I won't come back to Ukraine. You know, I've done what I need to do. And but we got out, and I was actually going to, when we got back, on the way back, I took a picture of this tank that was on the side of the road, a Russian one. And I met up with a guy who was actually going to get me in embed with the Northern Provision guys.
Yeah.
And I said, cool, man. Same deal. So I want to do the SEALs. They can keep the memory card and just tell me the pictures I can use, or if they want me to blank everything out. He goes, yeah, it shouldn't be a problem. And then they were heading off on a mission that night, and I was waiting on the call. And then I got a call. He said, listen, I spoke to them, and they said, no, it can't happen. We can't have everyone on this. It's pretty dodgy. So I waited around for another couple of days, hopefully to get on a mission with those boys, just to, again, document it. But I didn't get the go-ahead, so I ended up just pulling out and going home. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was pretty crazy.
That's wild, bro. That's awesome. So is there like a community that you guys kind of talk within? I mean, like, you know, as wars are kind of kicking off, and, you know, back in the 2000s, it was Iraq, Afghanistan, and like embedding with the like American forces. Now that's pretty much, I don't want to say gone. It seems like it's a lot harder to do that with the Ukrainians opposed to, like, you know, I remember back in Iraq, like, you know, we didn't want, you know, reporters with us, but at the same time, it felt like it was slightly easier to like go over and jump in and whatnot. But how is that? I mean, you guys like in the community kind of are like, what's the next war? What's the next, you know, thing we're going to go do? And
yeah, well, Kim from that I was with in Mosul, he's one of the medics I talked about. He was going to go into Gaza, and I said, cool, I'll join you, man. Let me know when you're going to book stuff, and if you need help arranging stuff. And I don't have any fixers or people that can help me in Egypt, which he would go through. So I was kind of depending on him. And then he said another Norwegian team went there and stayed 10 days on the border, could not get in. He said, so the trip's off. We're not going to get in. So that was a disappointment. I really wanted to go as an independent. Like I've been doing, basically I'm a photojournalist. So I go in independently and take footage and film of something that happens in a war zone, you know, and I tell the story from those that I'm there with. So what I thought about Gaza was I'll go in not against the Jews, not against Hamas or the Palestinians or anyone, just to document what's happening. You know, the people coming out, those have been injured, the hospitals have been hit, and blah blah blah. But I didn't get that opportunity, so that was kind of disappointing. But one trip I forgot to mention was in Ukraine. Is I went to Mykolaiv when it was right on the front.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I met up with a Mykolaiv SWAT team, And this was through a fixer. So this is through a guy that I didn't know that well, but he ended up being an awesome dude. He was an ex-Special Forces Ukrainian guy, and he got me these contacts. And it was kind of weird, man. The only way to get to Mykolaiv at that point, there was no public transport because it was war zone and near the front line there. So I downloaded this app, like a shared taxi app, where you go on the app and you say, I need to get from Odessa to Mykolaiv, and then you find a car, cheapest price, and go select, and you meet at a certain point.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, this is so dodgy, man. Like, but I've got to do it. But it's the only way to get there. The time's running out. So I get there, and then I see the car, shake hands with the guy, secretly take a picture of his number plate, secretly take a picture of him and send it to my mate. I said, just in case. And then I got there and met up with the SWAT team, and they showed me around the place, and the buildings had been destroyed and stuff. And I stayed at this hotel. I booked one through the internet, Airbnb or actually hotels.com, I think it was. I got there and the place was closed, shut it up. Like everything, most of the stuff in Mykolaiv at that point was closed, And so where am I going to stay? And this dude goes, oh, I know of another hotel. And so I walked to this hotel and it was all boarded up, but the door opened and it was all black inside. And I'm going, hello. Yeah. Is this a hotel? Yes, it is. And really expensive though, because it was the only hotel open, and BBC was staying there, and the Red Cross. Yeah.
So they were just milking the
price is through the roof. But I'm like, I've got no choice. I'm staying. Yeah. I got the last room, and I was speaking to the BBC reporter afterwards, and she was saying, we're staying here because we're hoping the Russians won't bomb this because the Red Cross is here. And I said, sounds good to me,
Yeah.
And dude, that night, it reminded me of Band of Brothers. You know, when some of the scenes where it's at night and you can see flashes in the background and the bombs going off, that's what it was like, Yeah. It was just these thuds and explosions, and I thought, fuck, man, this is taking me back to a movie again. But when I met up with the SWAT team, I didn't know if they were actually SWAT. I didn't know if they were real people. I didn't know if I was getting myself into trouble because the Russians were just not far away. I don't know, a kilometre or two away from where we were staying. So it's like I ended up putting on some soft armour under my T-shirt that I managed to borrow from my old job. And I took a picture, sent it to my mate and said, this is what I'm wearing. This is my location, just in case you don't hear from me again. And then I put a shirt over the soft armour and met up with these guys just in case I was going to get stabbed or shot, And then did the old knife thing too. So I would always have my pocket knife because you weren't allowed to have a firearm on my belt. But ended up being okay. But that was a pretty crazy ride too. We're patrolling the streets and the sirens are going off and bombs are going off. And then we're sitting at this cafe having lunch, and awesome guys, these SWAT team though. I stay in touch with them still. Fucking great guys. Might get a visit from one of them in Norway. But we're sitting in this restaurant and I hear explosions pretty close. And I said, that sounds like incoming. And they said, we're not sure. And I said, I think it does sound like incoming. And they said, we'll check. And so they got onto, I don't know what it was, and he got back to me straight away and he said, they get these live updates from somewhere because they're SWAT. I guess, I don't know how they do it, but he said, yeah, it's incoming, and a woman was just killed, a child was just killed, as it's happening, like not live, bang, 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 but minutes afterwards.
Yeah.
So I've gone, oh, shit, if this hits this cafe where we are, we're screwed. But we were fine. And another thing I want to say is that when you talk about that burning wheel, when you look back at it and you're away from the chaos, each time I come back, I dream about bombs for a few days.
Yeah.
When I came back from Mosul the first time, I jumped out of the bedroom window because I thought the bombs were going off.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my wife's like, I was married at the time. She said, what the fuck are you doing? And I was like, no, nothing. Just,
Yeah.
It's weird.
Yeah. Well,
Did you get that?
What's that?
Did you get that?
Yeah, I did. I dreamt of firefights, and I dreamt of the places that I was. But yeah, there's times when, you're just on edge, or it's just, you dream of the bombs going off 100%. Yeah, it's a thing. Yeah.
But the difference between me and you, I guess, is that I've always shot back with a camera. I've actually never shot at anyone before. So I guess that's a big difference.
Yeah, there is a bit of a nice psychological relief when you get to pull the trigger back.
Yeah,
Sometimes it is
100%.
just like it's a therapy, it's a weird way to say it, but it really is. When you're I'd rather be in a gunfight than an artillery barrage. We got hit with a lot of indirect fire, and that was in IEDs, and that was the worst. That it just sucked because you couldn't like point something in one direction and fire, and then maybe, and get the enemy. It was just, you just had to take it. So firefights were much more exciting and much more, you felt like you could do something, like even just fired in the direction, like you could do something about your situation. And that's always, a bit of, I don't say relief, but, psychologically when you're thinking about that, like getting hit with IEDs just sucks. It just fucking sucks.
Yeah.
And obviously mines or what Ukrainians are dealing with the artillery barrages, I can't imagine. Those guys are getting shell shocks, or getting shell shocked in the trenches, and it's just insane. And like what's going on over there. But
well, one point in Ukraine, when I was with the EOD boys, we drove past this on the way back from Irpin. There was destroyed tanks everywhere in the fields, and we stopped. In this one tank, I found 2 Russian ballistic plates. That a soldier had been wearing, and I still have them actually. And shrapnel went through one of them, and this was, I think it was a level 4 plate. So some of them had some companies they have squared ballistic or Kevlar materials within the plates to make it a level 4. We found those everywhere, but there was no human remains whatsoever, and the plates were actually seriously burnt. But they can handle it in extreme temperatures. So we had 2 plates and these square ballistic shields, but nothing else, man.
Yeah. So there's there's getting
gone, just gone,
absolutely obliterated. Yeah, and that's, I mean, we said we could talk for hours about that. I talked with some of the other guys too, just the change of warfare tactics, especially with the drones. I actually was talking with Nick Laidlaw about it, and we talk about Gaza. We're like a month or 2 ago, we're like, oh, it'd be nice to get in, or it's just different there because they're controlling the situation much tighter. But it's like, we were talking about Ukraine again. It's like, especially as it comes to combat photography or photojournalists, it's like your bravery is as far as you want to go. It will take you as far as you want to go, but it's there. There's no mercy. In fact, I think he knew 2 guys that just got hit with the drones, with the suicide drones. So like,
were they journalists?
Yeah, they were journalists. Yeah, or they were close to them. Like they were targeted. I think they survived, but it's like, you chuckle on Instagram, but you're also like, in the back of my head, I'm like, this is going to be a nightmare war scenario. When you see the drone circling, it's almost like taunting, and like the Russians running around the vehicle, just like,
trying to get away from it.
Trying to get away, but he knows there's nowhere to go.
And then please.
Yeah, he's like that, and then you go around and it just hits him. It's like they're taunting him.
Yeah.
And you're like, and I get it from the Ukrainians' perspective. You're just like, you're here, I'm going to fucking kill you and make sure that, you suffer. So I get why, but that just psychologically, you see that and you're like, dude, like that's just another level of warfare that now we've crossed. So it's wild, but anyway,
that's super scary.
Yeah, it is. But dude, this is an awesome podcast. I'm glad we went well over our. I'm pumped. We did hour 40. So, cool. Where can people find you at and whatnot?
So I'm online. I have an Instagram account. It's called the Aussie Overseas, and I post most of it on there, really, and a few articles in magazines.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on, bro.
Yeah, good to see you, buddy. Thanks for the chat.
Thank you. You too.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers.